You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. On the evening of June 25, 1950, North Korea made a bold and unexpected move by launching a massive invasion into South Korea. With 10 divisions made up of 89,000 troops, the North Koreans advanced in 6 groups. This took the South Korean military by surprise, leading to a significant defeat. The South Korean army was caught off guard, poorly equipped, and not ready for war, making them no match for the stronger North Korean forces. In just a few days, by June 28, North Korean forces had made significant advances, capturing Seoul, the capital of South Korea. This forced the South Korean government and its remaining military to retreat further south. In response to this crisis, the United Nations Security Council made a decisive move to help South Korea. Following this decision, United States President Harry S. Truman sent American ground troops to the area to support South Korea. However, after World War II ended 5 years earlier, the American military forces in the Far East had been reduced in size. The nearest available unit was the 24th Infantry Division of the 8th United States Army, stationed in Kyushu, Japan, under General William F. Dean. This division was not at full strength, lacking in manpower and equipped with outdated gear due to post-war budget cuts. Despite these challenges, the 24th Infantry Division was tasked with absorbing the initial impact of the North Korean invasion until more American forces could arrive in Korea to help stabilize the situation and establish a defensive perimeter. A battalion from the 24th Infantry Division was chosen to be quickly flown into Korea using C-54 Skymaster planes. Their mission was to stop the North Korean forces from advancing, while the rest of the division was sent over by ship. The 21st Infantry Regiment stood out as the most ready for battle among the 3 regiments of the division. Selected for this task was the 1st Battalion of the 21st Infantry because its leader, Lieutenant Colonel Charles B. Smith, came with a lot of experience, having led a battalion in the Battle of Guadalcanal during World War II. On July 5th, this group, known as Task Force Smith, confronted North Korean troops at the Battle of Chonan. They managed to hold off more than 5,000 North Korean soldiers for about 7 hours, but eventually had to fall back after being overwhelmed. Meanwhile, the 34th Infantry Regiment was setting up defense lines between Pyeongtaek and Ansong, around 10 miles south of Osan, preparing for the next round of delay tactics against the North Korean advance. However, this regiment was also not fully prepared for combat. The majority of the regiment retreated to Chonan without facing the enemy directly. The 1st Battalion, left to fend for itself, engaged in a short and chaotic fight at the Battle of Pyeongtaek against the advancing North Koreans. The 34th Infantry found themselves outmatched by North Korean tanks, specifically because they lacked the necessary equipment to take on the heavily armored T-34 tanks. After fighting for about 30 minutes, the battalion pulled back in a disorderly retreat, with many soldiers leaving behind their gear and running away without confronting the North Korean forces. This attempt to delay the North Koreans at Pyeongtaek and Ansong unfortunately did not significantly slow them down or cause substantial enemy casualties. After overcoming U.S. forces in Osan and Pyeongtaek, the North Korean 4th Infantry Division, with support from the 105th Armored Division, pressed forward. Commanded by Lee Kwan-moo, the division boasted up to 12,000 men in 2 infantry regiments, backed by several tanks. Their victories had bolstered their morale and equipped them better than the inexperienced Americans they faced. In the aftermath of Pyeongtaek, the scattered U.S. 1st Battalion of the 34th Infantry fell back to Chonan, regrouping with their regiment and elements of the 1st Battalion of the 21st Infantry, who hadn't been part of the Battle of Osan. Brigadier General George B. Barth from the 24th Infantry Division, acting as temporary artillery commander, stationed the 1st Battalion of the 21st Infantry south of Chonan before heading to Daejeon. He also sent the 1st Battalion of the 34th Infantry to bolster this position. Meanwhile, L Company from the 3rd Battalion of the 34th Infantry was ordered to advance north and confront the North Korean advance. Major General Dean from Daejeon commanded the remainder of the 3rd Battalion to support L Company. The regimental leader, Colonel J. B. Lovelace, and Colonel Robert R. Martin, a friend of Dean, moved north to join them. Just before noon, the 1st Battalion of the 21st Infantry was directed to retreat southeast to Chachuan to secure the railway and supply lines to Chonan. leaving the defense of Chonan to the 34th Infantry's 1st and 3rd Battalions. By this point, South Korean military and civilians had largely vacated the area, leaving the U.S. troops as the primary resistance against the North Korean advance. At about 1 p.m., L Company, positioned 5 miles north of Chonan, encountered North Korean small arms fire. Martin was informed by Dean of the presence of around 50 North Korean T-34 tanks at Ansong, signaling a larger enemy force nearby. With North Korean forces assembling in the villages to potentially encircle Chonan, Martin and Lovelace regrouped at the 34th Infantry's command center. The 3rd Battalion, under the guidance of Operations Officer John J. Dunn, started establishing defensive positions, but faced an initial setback when North Korean scouts attacked, causing them to retreat and leave behind wounded, including Dunn, who was captured. It took 2 hours before the main North Korean force moved through this area. The battalion retreated to Chonan in disarray, but managed to set up defenses around the town by 5 p.m., particularly guarding the northern and western approaches near a railway station. The 1st Battalion, still reeling from its earlier encounter at Pyeongtaek, also took positions but stayed out of the ensuing fight in Chonan. Around 6 p.m., Dean instructed Martin to assume command of the 34th Infantry Regiment, replacing Lovelace. On the evening of July 7th, tension increased at the west edge of Chonan as North Korean forces began their approach. Around 8 p.m., a group of North Korean tanks and soldiers started moving toward the town from the east. They were met with fire from the 63rd Field Artillery Battalion, which was providing support to the 34th Infantry using 105mm howitzers. They fired both white phosphorus and high-explosive anti-tank shells. Thanks to their efforts, 2 North Korean tanks were destroyed, but by midnight the enemy had made their way into Chonan. Throughout the night, the 63rd Battalion kept firing white phosphorus to light up the area, helping U.S. forces to hold their ground. After midnight, the North Koreans managed to isolate about 80 U.S. men, including Martin. In response, Lieutenant Colonel Robert L. Wadlington stepped up, contacted Dean for more ammunition, and by 2:20 a.m. on July 8th, they had managed to reopen the supply route to Daejeon. But the battle was far from over. In the early hours, another North Korean infantry column attacked Chonan from the northwest. Leading with 5 or 6 tanks, they pushed into the town, targeting vehicles and buildings thought to be hiding Americans. By 6 a.m., their infantry swarmed in, clashing intensely with the U.S. 3rd Battalion, 34th Infantry Regiment in the streets. The U.S. forces managed to destroy 2 of the tanks using rockets and grenades, yet the North Korean column succeeded in isolating 2 companies of the 3rd Battalion. Tragically, around 8 a.m., Martin, who had only been in command of the 34th Infantry Regiment for 14 hours, was killed by a North Korean tank. At the moment, he fired a 2.36-inch bazooka at a North Korean T-34 tank. It fired its main cannon at him. Unfortunately, Martin's bazooka, being outdated, couldn't penetrate the armor of the T-34, and he was killed instantly. After the sad event of Martin's passing, things started to get really tough for the 3rd Battalion, 34th Infantry. They were facing an overwhelming number of North Korean forces making their way into Chonan from multiple directions. Despite taking heavy losses, the relentless support from the 63rd Field Artillery Battalion kept them from being completely overrun. From 8 to 10 in the morning, U.S. troops began to hastily leave the town, with quite a few soldiers leaving their posts and fleeing the battle scene. Wadlington, who took over the helm of the 34th Infantry, managed to regroup the 3rd Battalion at a spot just south of Chonan. There, the 1st Battalion was already in place, unscathed and ready, though they soon found themselves dodging mortar attacks from North Korean troops but didn't engage in direct combat. In the midst of all this, General Dean and Lieutenant General Walton Walker showed up just south of the town to see what was happening for themselves, right as the last members of the 34th were leaving Chonan. Dean gave the order for the 34th Infantry Regiment to head back to the Kum River. The 3rd Battalion, now significantly reduced to 175 soldiers, having lost about 2/3 of its original numbers, or around 350 soldiers in Chonan, also had to leave behind much of their heavy gear, including mortars and machine guns. North Korean broadcasts claimed they'd captured 60 American soldiers in the town. The regiment started its retreat in the late afternoon, with the North Korean troops keeping pace on nearby ridges. Most of the battalion had to move out on foot or by truck, taking a much-needed break on the evening of July 8th, and by July 9th they made it to the Coom River ready to set up defense once again. The 34th Infantry took a step back to the Coom River after facing tough times in the battles at Pyeongtaek and Chonan, where it saw heavy casualties. Despite this, they managed to hold off the North Korean forces for about 14 to 20 hours. This crucial time allowed the 21st Infantry Regiment to prepare for another delaying tactic at Chonui and Chochiwon. Following this, the 34th Infantry built defenses along the Coom River and took a much-needed break for a few days before they were thrust into the Battle of Taejeon. There they were primarily responsible for defending the city, as the 21st and 19th Infantry were in no shape to put up a strong fight. Unfortunately, the battle led to the 24th Infantry Division being almost completely wiped out. Despite suffering a severe military defeat, the 24th Infantry Division succeeded in its goal to slow down the North Korean advance until July 20th. By then, American forces had established a defensive line known as the Pusan Perimeter along the Naktong River and towards Taegu in the southeast. This defense was crucial in the eventual downfall of the North Korean Army in the Battle of Pusan Perimeter. Robert R. Martin, who led the 34th Infantry Regiment during the battle, was honored with the Distinguished Service Cross posthumously for his bravery at Chonan. This was the first award of its kind given in the Korean War. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.